You're watching Anglia. Now it's time to catch up with the day's news from ITN.
From the studios of ITN, the News and Sport, with Andrea Catherwood and Bob Hall.
Good evening, welcome to the programme. Tonight's headlines: floral tributes for the 7th family murdered in arson attack. Cook spells out tough message for the US in banana trade war.
And the goal that put Arsenal through to the FA Cup semi-finals.
Police are tonight trying to establish the motive behind an arson attack on a family home which killed 7 people. 4 generations died in the blaze in East London. 3 of the victims were young children. A petrol container was removed from the scene. Police said it was an horrific attack on innocents. Philippa Young reports.
More flowers this evening. They've been mounting up all day from friends and neighbours stunned by what happened here. The blaze left 4 generations of the same family dead. A 2-year-old boy, his 4-year-old twin sisters, their father, grandmother and great-grandmother were killed, along with a family friend.
Fire was just gushing out of the windows and the windows just smashed through. And no one could get up there and everyone was screaming at people to get up there. But no one could get up there.
Investigators have spent all day trying to establish how the fire started. The blaze ripped through the house within minutes. The police took away an empty petrol can early this morning. Soon after, they confirmed they'd launched a murder investigation.
This is a horrendous attack on innocents. You have, as I've mentioned, the twins who are dead. The 2-year-old, as I understand it, didn't actually reach the power of speech.
The house was gutted in the fire. It had to be shored up by scaffolding before a full investigation could start. The local MP came and looked on in disbelief.
The very idea that 7 people could have died in a fire is bad enough, but the suspicion that it's arson and possibly murder makes the mind boggle.
The bodies were brought down one by one and were finally driven away early this afternoon. Tonight, detectives are still trying to find out how and why the fire was started. Philippa Young, ITN, East London.
Britain continued its tough stance against America today after an emergency meeting to try to end the trade war over bananas. The Foreign Secretary Robin Cook told his American counterpart Madeleine Albright of Britain's strong concern over her country's actions. Shuli Ghosh reports.
The US Secretary of State was in Britain for discussions on the Kosovo peace process. But also on the agenda was the banana trade war, which is threatening Anglo-US relations. This afternoon, Mrs. Albright arrived at Robin Cook's country residence, aware that Washington has caused outrage with its move to impose trade sanctions on European products. Mr. Cook said he'd made Britain's concerns clear, and both sides felt urgent talks were needed.
I made it clear that we cannot accept that the United States should act only a few weeks before the World Trade Organization gives its ruling. There is no reason why they cannot wait on that ruling.
The banana trade row has rumbled on for years. The United States believes the European Union unfairly favours small Caribbean producers over Latin American ones, many of which are controlled by US firms. Trade restrictions would hit British manufacturers hard, in particular the cashmere industry in Scotland, where more than 2,000 jobs are at risk. The meeting between Robin Cook and Madeleine Albright lasted little more than 2 hours, but the crunch meeting will happen on Monday, when the World Trade Organization gathers in an emergency summit to discuss the deepening crisis. Shuli Ghosh, ITN, at Chevening in Kent.
2 more people are being treated in hospital in Cumbria tonight for the effects of E. coli poisoning. The latest cases bring to a total of 30 the number of people affected. Will Walden reports from Cumbria.
Tonight, the farm at the centre of this outbreak remains closed. 30 people are now thought to have contracted E. coli from milk produced here. 19 of those 30 are confirmed cases.
The incubation period can be as long as 10 days or more, and we only found out we only stopped the source of the infection on Tuesday night, so we have got a few more days yet. But I hope very much that we have seen the peak.
The 2 latest victims, admitted overnight, are being treated at the West Cumberland Hospital in Whitehaven. Of the 7 adults and 3 children here, 1 adult is described as poorly. One of the 3 children, 10-year-old Joseph Tiffin, was readmitted in the early hours of this morning, having been discharged just hours earlier.
The doctor's not overly concerned. It's just a case of monitoring him, really. My youngest daughter has is probably positive, we found out this morning. So she's going to have to come in and have her blood checked, and that's very worrying.
3 other children from the area remain poorly in a Newcastle hospital with renal complications. Health officials here say it'll be Monday at the earliest before they'll know if this outbreak has been successfully contained. Will Walden, ITN, Cumbria.
Prosecutors in the Louise Woodward investigation have dismissed as ludicrous new claims about the death of baby Matthew Eapen. An American documentary will say tomorrow night that he died after being strangled, not violently shaken. Peter Henley reports.
Louise Woodward has always believed that medical evidence could clear her name, and this startling new opinion that baby Matthew Eapen was not shaken but strangled comes from one of America's top child abuse experts.
You do not believe that Matthew Eapen died of shaken baby syndrome?
That's correct.
Was she unfairly convicted on that basis, in your estimation?
In my estimation, she was unfairly convicted.
Why did they do that to me?
The new evidence suggests that baby Matthew could have been strangled 48 hours before he was taken to hospital, at a time he was not in the British nanny's care.
Better late than never. Let's get this right. We are after the truth.
Well, my take is what it was at the time, that I was questioned about that as a possibility, is that it's pretty ludicrous.
Matthew Eapen's parents could now have to endure a fresh trial.
They should have tried to find the truth, to find out what really happened, before they just pointed the finger at me and arrested me.
Now studying law, it will be up to Louise Woodward whether to face the inevitable publicity of a new fight in the American courts. Peter Henley, ITN.
The bodies of the 4 Britons murdered by Hutu rebels in Uganda have been flown back to Britain. The coffins, together with those of the other 4 victims, were met by relatives at Gatwick Airport. Earlier, British police flew to Uganda to help with the investigation into the killings. Kosovo's ethnic Albanians, still battling Serbian forces in the disputed province, are reported to be on the verge of signing a peace deal. The agreement is yet to be ratified by either side in the conflict. The Liberal Democrat leader Paddy Ashdown vowed today that his party will not enter into a coalition with the Scottish Nationalists as long as they are committed to full independence. Elections to the new Scottish Parliament are now just 2 months away. Our Scotland correspondent Harry Smith reports.
Raising the flag in Edinburgh over what will be his last party conference, Paddy Ashdown set out his terms for forming a coalition in the new Scottish Parliament.
We're not prepared to work with anybody who is going to break up the United Kingdom. And we're not prepared to work with anybody who is not going to be serious about investing in Scotland's public services, above all in their education system and the health system.
Those last few words aimed at Labour, whose leader Donald Dewar told his conference they had a fight on their hands.
The choice before the electorate was well defined. It's stark. Should the Parliament be dominated from day one by an arid, probably embittering argument about constitutional change? Or will the Parliament with a Labour administration immediately get down to work?
Tomorrow, Paddy Ashdown delivers his final speech to a major party conference. Next weekend, it's the turn of Alex Salmond to rally his troops at the SNP conference in Aberdeen. All the party leaders know that with this election being fought under a new system of proportional representation, it's highly unlikely any one party will have an overall majority. Once the voters have had their say, deals will have to be struck. The opening bids have already begun. Harry Smith, ITN, Glasgow.
The race to be the first to balloon around the world is entering a crucial phase tonight. The all-British cable and wireless team is preparing to start on the critical Pacific Ocean leg. But hot on their heels is the Anglo-Swiss Breitling orbiter. Karen Bauman reports.
The cable and wireless crew is facing the most challenging part of their trip, crossing the Pacific. In the balloon and at base, the final checks are being made.
It's a long, long stretch of water. It's obviously fairly daunting to do 4,000 miles over water. We're checking all the emergency equipment to make sure that all works in case they ditch. And of course, this is where other attempts have failed, and we want to make sure we hit the right jet stream to take us all the way to America.
Mission Control has received the latest pictures of the balloonists, refuelling outside the capsule and showing off their new beards within, smiling even though the Anglo-Swiss team is gaining ground behind them. The 2 British balloonists are crossing Japan. Their rivals in the Breitling orbiter are over Saudi Arabia, close to Yemen. They've been refused permission to fly over the country, which will delay them, but they're generally making good progress. Will they, though, catch up with the cable and wireless team?
It was always a long shot, Karen. I mean, they had, a 10 or 11-day start on us. Perhaps I ought to say that it's not really a race. I mean, I know everybody thinks it is now, and of course there is an element of it with us, but we'll give it a pretty good go.
They also have a slight problem with one of their burners, but they plan to fix that soon. Karen Bauman, ITN.
Well, now for a roundup of all the day's sports news, here's Bob Hall. Bob.
Arsenal are the first team through to this season's FA Cup semi-finals. They beat Derby County at Highbury by 1-0. A late strike from Kanu separated the sides. Richard Cook reports.
Arsenal, chasing a second successive League and Cup double, were odds-on favourites to reach another semi-final. But it was Derby who made the early chances, Paulo Wanchope testing David Seaman. At the other end, Arsenal were also creating openings. But the match was becoming increasingly niggly. Nicholas Anelka, one of 5 players to be booked in the first 45 minutes. Into the second half, and Arsenal began to step up a gear. Mark Overmars toying with the Derby defence. Anelka, who hasn't stopped scoring lately, came even closer. But then an inspired substitution made all the difference. Kanu, the villain for scoring an unsporting goal in Arsenal's last cup tie, became a hero, thrashing in the winner with just a minute left. No offers of a replay this time. Arsenal's sights firmly set on another Wembley date. Richard Cook, ITN Sport.
So Arsenal march on to who knows what. Today's other quarter-final had to be called off. It snowed heavily in South Yorkshire, making Barnsley's Oakwell ground unplayable. They'll try again a week on Tuesday to meet Spurs. The 3 Premiership games affected the foot of the table. The Norwegian Trond Egil Soltvedt was hauled off the bench by Gordon Strachan to score Coventry's winner and deny Charlton. This after John Aloisi had been sent off, reducing Coventry to 10 men. Southampton scored the only goal to beat West Ham, courtesy of their Moroccan international Hassan Kasloul. And Steve Guppy got an early goal that'll do nothing to aid Joe Kinnear's recovery. It was all Leicester needed to beat Wimbledon and a seriously indifferent spell that had seen them lose 4 of their last 5. Indeed, it was their first league win since Boxing Day, but Tony Conte still waits for his 200th league goal. The one real change is that Coventry climbed 2 places, and Charlton's run of 5 unbeaten ends, they dropped to 1 place off the bottom 3. Dundee United won their 4th round replay in the Cup in Scotland, winning 3-0 against Clydebank. St Johnstone won 2-0 at Motherwell in their 5th round tie. In the Premiership, Kilmarnock, with 1 goal in 5 starts, failed again. They were held 0-0 at home by the bottom club, Dunfermline Athletic. Now, Rugby Union and Wales turned on one of their best displays for years to beat the French in a thrilling 5 Nations match in Paris. Wales' victory by 34 points to 33 shattered French hopes of another Grand Slam. Meanwhile, England went to the top of the table. They beat Ireland 27 points to 15. Peter Staunton reports.
It's already being hailed as the game that had everything. Yet, according to the form book, there was only one side in it. The Welsh simply had no chance of overturning the odds. But they produced one of their most remarkable performances in Paris, where they hadn't won for 24 years. It began with a try from Chavis. France responded immediately with a free-flowing breakaway from Nuttemark. When he scored a second try, it looked like France was set to dominate the rest of the match. But Wales regrouped and ran through the French lines twice more in the half, the first from David James. Then they created an acre of space on the right wing, where the unlikely figure of Craig Quinnell had all the time in the world to go over. After the break, France stormed back with 2 more tries. It gave them a 2-point lead with just minutes to go. But Neil Jenkins' tally for the game was 19 points. This was the penalty which won it for Wales. A victory which will be celebrated for years. After that, anything would have been an anticlimax. At Lansdowne Road, England and Ireland played out a relatively dour affair. After half an hour, England managed to create the space that was needed to break the Irish defence down. Matt Perry on the end of the move. England kept a few points ahead, thanks to another impeccable performance from kicker Johnny Wilkinson, and he almost won the game for England with this break. Ireland's defence smothered that. When the ball flew across the field, Dan Luger failed to make a clean catch. At 15:20, it was still too close to call, but England made sure with a Tim Rodber score. Captain Dallaglio was made man of the match. His team now close to a 5th successive Triple Crown. Only Wales stand in the way, but on today's form, they'll be formidable opposition. Peter Staunton, ITN Sport.
And finally, motor racing, Mika Häkkinen will be in pole position for the first Grand Prix of the season in Australia. The world champion recovered from his 100-mile-an-hour crash 24 hours earlier to win the qualifying session ahead of McLaren teammate David Coulthard.
Finally, tonight's winning national lottery numbers are 8, 32, 33, 37, 43 and 47. The bonus number is 45. Camelot says there are 3 winners who will share the £8.3 million jackpot. Well, that's all from ITN. From the Weekend News team, have a very good night.
Good night.